All right, time to talk about one of the most important topics, certainly in the data modeling section, but perhaps in the entire course, filter context and flow. So to demonstrate this, we're going to use a simplified example, just 3 tables here. We've got 2 fact tables, sales data and returns data, both connected to a single dimension table, territory lookup. Now, you may have noticed these arrows that appear on the relationship lines in Power BI. These arrows are designed to show the filter direction, and they point from the one side of the relationship, the dimension side, to the many side, the fact table side. And what this means is that when you filter a table, the filter context that you're creating passes through the relationship to any related downstream tables, following the direction of the arrow. So it can be helpful to think of relationships almost like filter wires, because essentially that's all they're designed to do is pass filter context from one table to another. And while that context can pass downstream in the direction of the arrow, it cannot flow the other direction. It cannot flow upstream from a fact table back up to a lookup table. And that's exactly why we've been arranging our lookup tables above the fact tables in our AdventureWorks model. It really just serves as a nice, helpful visual reminder that the filter context will always flow down from those lookup and dimension tables to the fact tables beneath them. So I know this might still feel a little bit vague. The whole concept of filter context can be a little bit tricky to wrap your head around at first. So let's dig in a little bit deeper and walk through a specific example. So here we've got that same simplified 3-table model. And in this case, the only valid way to filter values from both sales and returns is to use the territory key from our territory lookup table, because that table is upstream and related to both of our fact tables. So when we do that, we see each territory key from 1 through 10 on our rows, and we see accurate values for both order quantity from our sales data table and return quantity from our returns data table. Now remember that we have a territory key field in all 3 of these tables. It exists as a foreign key in the sales data table, and it also exists as a foreign key in the returns data table. So what if we accidentally created our matrix by pulling in territory key from the sales data table, for instance? Well, in that case, we'd see an output that looks something like this. We'd see all 10 territories with the correct order quantities associated with them, but we'd see that same repeating grand total in our return quantity column. And the reason for that is that the filter context that we created by pulling in territory key from the sales data table gets trapped inside that table. It's not able to pass upstream against the direction of the arrow back to the territory lookup or down to the returns data table. And as a result, our returns data table has no idea what filter context was created because, again, it was trapped inside of that sales data table. And by similar logic, if we were to filter on territory key from the returns data table, we'd see the correct values for returned quantity, but repeated totals for order quantity because the filter context was trapped inside of the returns table. And you'll also notice that this table is smaller. It contains fewer rows. In fact, you'll notice that territories 2 and 3 are actually missing from this matrix entirely. And that's because we didn't register any returns from territories 2 or 3. So those territory keys don't even exist in the returns data table, even though we did see orders or sales from both of those territories. So hopefully this helps to visualize what's going on here a little bit more clearly. Let's take just one more minute, jump into Power BI, and see exactly what this looks like inside of the Power BI environment. Okay, so go ahead and open up your AdventureWorks report. If you've been following along, you should see a matrix that looks like this. We were breaking down the order quantity and return quantity values by education level. Let's go ahead and modify this visual, and instead of education level, let's add data and pull in the territory key from the territory lookup table. And just like we showed in the slide, we should see all 10 territories represented, which we do, and we should see accurate order numbers and return numbers. Note that we see missing values for territories 2 and 3, since those territories didn't register a return in that table. So this is accurate. This is a valid way to filter these values because, again, we're using territory key from the territory lookup table, which is upstream and related to both of our data tables. And following the same example that we just talked about, Let's remove territory key and pull in the territory key from the sales table, which lives right here. And that's where we see those repeated values because the filter context is getting trapped in our sales data table. And then vice versa, if we grab the territory key from our returns table, now we see that same repeating grand total from sales, and we also see those two missing territories, number 2 and 3. So hopefully this demo starts to give you a sense of why filter flow is so important to understand. Having a crystal clear understanding of our model's filter context and flow will be critical for making sure that the views we're creating, the filters we're using, and the values we're displaying are 100% accurate.